Race is a social construct. It's kind of something we just made up.
Let's talk race, culture, and craft. Oh boy, somebody is bound to unsubscribe.
The other day, I saw a course, an online course I really wanted to sign up for. I mean, I really, really wanted to sign up for this class. But then I saw in the course description that it was only for people of color. More specifically, if you were white, you were not allowed to take this course. I'm not white. I'm totally considered a person of color. So well, sort of. I mean, some people can argue Asians are part of the model minority, and so we're not a person of color, but the model minority is a very insidious stereotype, and that's really, but basically, most people would consider me a person of color. Well, at least I'm definitely not white, so I would say I qualify. And did I mention yet that I really, really wanted to take this course? But with really heavy heart, I had to choose not to take it. I was really bummed about not signing up for that class. I mean, I really wanted to. And the selfish part of me kept saying, "Look, you qualify. You can take this course. Only white people are not allowed. I'm fine. So what do I care, you know?" As if that was a good enough justification for me to do exactly what I wanted to do. I really wanted to take that class, but you know, discrimination is discrimination. And had they said no, insert any other blanket class of people, again, I still would have refrained from taking the course. So, principles are principles. Doesn't that suck? Wait a minute, why did I open with this story again? I think I forgot my train of thought. Oh, right, to get trolled and a bunch of thumbs down before people have even finished watching the video. That's why. Do I believe there is such a thing as white privilege? Yes. Do I believe we need to do a better job educating our students about post colonialism and imperialism? Yes, I do. Do I believe we need a more inclusive educational modality of teaching people history through different lenses, not just the lens of white people? Absolutely. I'm a social political activist, and in my college years, I used to be an angry one at that. So, race politics is one of those issues that I care deeply about. Politics surges through my blood. But when it comes to rectifying past wrongs, being an asshole to white people today isn't the answer. In fact, it's part of the problem. To lump all so called white people together and assume they all have some shared collective privileged experience is it's ignorant. It's ignorant. Just one example for East Asians versus East Asians. East Germans versus West Germans in Germany and the rampant, totally open discrimination that goes on between East Germans and West Germans, discrimination that's often sanctioned and condoned by the German government. That's not okay. Or how do the educated, well-to-do people in New York and California, irrespective of their skin tones, look at the poor whites trapped by the cycle of poverty who are all sandwiched in the middle of the country in the Bible Belt? I mean, that level of elitism and snobbery is discrimination, and that's not okay. There's horribly problematic classism here in the United States among whites. I completely acknowledge that as an educated, well to do Asian female, I do enjoy certain socioeconomic privileges that a lot of white men do not. Privilege isn't just white, much of it is actually socioeconomic. Does your race unjustifiably beget privilege or marginalization? Yes, but race is just one of many factors that trigger the privilege marginalization dichotomy. I think less navel gazing and more looking around at how all of us are suffering will do the society good. Okay, what the heck does all of this have to do with craft? Practitioners of craft will consider their craft, their spiritual paths, to be a core part of their identity. For most of us, you can't separate your craft from your sense of personal identity, kind of like race and culture. So, race, culture, along with our craft and identity through craft, are all put together in this melting pot that comes to define who we are and who we think we are. Craft, race, and culture are all essential features of how we express our identities. So, craft and race getting mixed up, or craft and culture getting mixed up, is an inevitability and makes perfect logical sense. But on another level, when you're exercising wisdom, compassion, and discernment, it does not or it should not make sense. I choose cultivation of personal spirituality because I want to have control over my ego, to be able to keep my ego in check. I choose cultivation of personal spirituality because I want to be able to overlook materialism, superficiality, and to realize a deeper, universal, collective purpose. So then, if these are the reasons I choose cultivation of personal spirituality and religion, conflating an individual's craft with race and culture suddenly makes no sense at all. In fact, it's counterintuitive and runs against the very purpose of cultivating personal spirituality. If I'm chiming in here, I think you can be inclusive and loving and accepting of racial diversity into any occult path or tradition, and still be a social justice warrior to fight racism, marginalization, and rectify social inequality. I think part of wisdom is to be able to discern that separation between figurative church and state within yourself, not just some broader governmental level. Can you, as a practitioner, worship in a diverse setting, be inclusive, share your craft and spirituality with the children of your oppressors, and then go out into society to combat racism, sexism, discrimination, and social inequality and speak out against those oppressors? I think so. I hope so. Likewise, pagan paths from European cultures that say non Europeans can't partake in the worship of their gods and the practice of their modality of occultism are inhibiting themselves from truly having a transcendental experience with their own gods. How can I say that with such confidence despite knowing next to nothing about these pantheons or cultures? The conception of deity, no matter which pantheon you're talking about, is a form of universal energy, an archetypal force of nature, and as such, it is beyond the illusory social problems that humans conjure up for ourselves and bind ourselves to. When we say a deity is parroting our own biases, personalities, or even political opinions, we haven't actually achieved communion with deity, but rather we're presuming ego is God. You see what I'm saying? You're actually worshiping your ego. You're not worshiping a god or goddess. It's your ego you've been petitioning and talking to. God is beyond your ego. Deity is beyond your ego. Deity never parrots your human character. You believing that deity is some supernatural extension of your character is you letting your human ego get the better of you. Wah, wah. Okay, let me turn that around and shed light on the other side. If you do not honor how the native people of a culture perceive their gods or the rules they've set for their craft, then you're a total shithead. Why? Why? Because you can before you can have a meaningful relationship with deity, with any deity, whether you're observing a monotheistic or polytheistic religious tradition, and I am really confident to say this applies universally across the board to any pantheon or religion, before you can have a meaningful relationship with the divine, you need to cultivate meaningful relationships with fellow man, with other people, with animals, with nature, with the physical world and the environment around you. You can't be a total shithead to people and animals here on earth or even to Gaia, to Mother Nature, and then look up to God and be like, "Hey you, to demonstrate compassion for people means understanding where natives are coming from when they get hyper defensive about their traditions. You can't talk about how you're spiritual, love and light, psychic, intuitive. Like, you honestly just can't actually be connected to spirit, truly connected, and still shit on native traditions or not show some respect for their sense of boundaries. If you don't have that sense of respect for people, quite honestly, I don't think you're as ascended as you seem to claim. Racial and cultural biases are a reality. Craft, by and large, is about attunement to greater forces beyond us that we still consider supernatural. If you want to master craft, then you have to address racial and cultural biases, because racial and cultural biases are part of how you are a shithead, and you need to address that shitheadedness and sort of cull that or exorcise that from you before you can truly turn toward divinity. Don't you love how I'm so graceful and eloquent? So, can you master occult craft and hold on to racism or cultural biases? If I'm chiming in here with my personal opinion, no, I don't think you can. No. Because mastery over occult craft hinges on attunement or some greater than most connection with deity, with unseen energy, and unseen energy that is a collective consciousness, a collective force field that is made up of all races and all cultures of people. It's made up of everybody. To master occult craft, you need to be keenly attuned to that collective force field. And you cannot be keenly attuned to that collective force field if you hold on to hostility, malice, resentment, or hatred for your fellow man or even fellow animals. Hey, that's just my opinion. If you're a hateful person and believe yourself to still be a master of occult craft, then all the more power to you. My opinion, omnipotent, unchallenged power can only come from love and compassion. It cannot come from hate and prejudice, because hate and prejudice only binds and limits you. It hinders your access to the collective force field if there's any hate or prejudice in you. To truly be powerful, you need to be compassionate and loving. I'm not just saying that to be all fluffy. I'm like saying it in a very sort of practical, hey, do you actually want power kind of way? Practically speaking, that's the answer. That's the key. Love and compassion, not in some fluffy way, but sort of just objectively speaking, love and compassion is the way to attaining power. So going in like a totally different direction now, but still under the umbrella of race, culture, and craft, is how racial privilege affects the narrative that's told about your craft. So what I mean by that is speaking just from my personal perspectives and experiences or observations. By and large, the literature out there in the English language on Taoist magic, on Taoism as a philosophy, Taoism as a religion, Taoist sorcery, and esoteric Buddhism are authored by white men. One factor that actually prompted me to go public with the release of the Tao of Craft, that second book, was racially and culturally motivated. In fact, it was like a huge factor. It wasn't just the majority of books on Taoism or Buddhism were by white men. It's that the actual statistic for it, when I did a calculation, was jarring. It was 95%, a statistic arrived at by adhering to all prevailing sociological methods for research and the scientific method. The actual percentage was just so jarring to me. I expected it to kind of be in the majority. I just didn't expect it to be 95%. 95% of the literature on my tradition was written by white dudes. So, in terms of the narrative of my craft, the native practitioners of the craft, the people born and raised into the craft, only had less than 5% of the pie. We made up less than 5% of the voice that was telling the story of our culture. Again, I want to make clear, I don't have a problem with non-Asians practicing Asian mysticism. No problem. In fact, I welcome it. I love it. I really, really love it. But the issue here is simply an imbalance of representation. The Asian culture, as it is represented in the West, is mainly represented by Westerners, not Asians themselves. Okay, back to, I guess, the main point I wanted to make for this video. Oh, now I know why I opened with that story. You cannot deny access to your gods or occult traditions without also inhibiting your own access. If you don't see the two as interrelated, then you haven't seen the whole picture. When you can understand that you hurting me is the same as you hurting yourself, then you can truly experience divine sight. You can truly achieve omnipotence. To shine with the light of the gods is to understand that interconnection. I just don't think you can scale the heights of occult mastery without first appreciating that concept. Hate, prejudice, preferential treatment are chains that keep you from truly mastering occult craft. That's because mastery of any modality of occultism requires clear and unhindered access to channels of collective force fields. Hate, prejudice, and exclusionary mentality blocks your access to such channels. You can't control the collective if you don't love the collective. That is what they mean when they say God is all loving, and why occultists aspire to be all loving. So, I really do believe to be exclusionary is to shoot yourself in the foot and hinder your own progress of spiritual development. But like I pointed out, we also can't have a racial or cultural imbalance of who gets to talk on behalf of an entire group of people. Let me put it bluntly, the Asians who get to stand on a public platform and speak about Asian mysticism and Asian occult practices needs to be more than just 5%. We need to be given more than just 5% of the pie that we baked. We can't just be given 5% of the seats at the table. Yet again, I'm jumping all over the place in my topics here, flip flopping back over to the other perspective. One of the things that breaks my heart is people not feeling comfortable about exploring other cultures and mystery traditions that don't necessarily align with their skin color. And the only reason they don't feel comfortable about it is because they don't want to be judged harshly by others for exploring that culture. I think that's insane. I hate to break it to you, but Mother Nature is not in favor of segregation. Just look at anthropology, evolutionary biology, natural events. Segregation is not Mother Nature's jam. A diversity of thoughts, approaches, and opinions improves my culture's mystery and occult traditions. What is true will always remain unchallengeable. You will not be able to challenge what is true in my tradition. Now, what is not true will fall to the wayside when challenged by your counterpoints. And that, my friends, is a good thing. So, a public exchange of ideas about my cultural traditions, with people chiming in from all different types of backgrounds, heritages, and experiences, advances my tradition. You never just want to hear from the so called purist experts. You want to hear from those with fresh perspectives. And who has fresh perspectives? Outsiders. Social and cultural cross pollination isn't the end of your survival, it's the key to your survival. And that key also means accepting that there are going to be changes to what your culture looks like, how your mystery traditions are practiced. I promise you that you don't want your mystery tradition to stay static and stagnant. You want it to be able to evolve. To truly have control is to let go of control. I mean, heck, even God understood that, right? With giving us free will and all. So I think when a practitioner of craft can understand and appreciate that idea, then you can totally level up with your abilities and advance your practice of craft to levels you could not even have dreamed of. I promise.
Okay, I took the plunge and talked about it. I talked about race, culture, and craft. Don't leave me hanging here all by myself. It's your turn. Race, culture, and craft. Go. What are your thoughts and opinions?